So obviously you guys are familiar with VMware, right? Are you familiar with NSX? You heard of it? You guys heard of NSX? Have you heard of Virtual Cloud Network?
Heard of it.
No? Have not? All right, so obviously NSX is our software-defined networking product, right? Virtual Cloud Network is kind of this next evolution of what NSX provides as a platform, right? So if you think about traditional VMware, right, with ESXi, it's hard to write when it, and then your on-prem physical network, right, that's where VMware kind of made their footprint, right? So several years ago we bought Nicira, and Nicira product has evolved into what is now NSX, right, with a large focus on providing SDN in that on-prem infrastructure, okay? Then in, I guess it was 2 years ago, maybe we made the announcement with Amazon, right, for VMware Cloud in AWS. So if we now take our VMC on AWS, or it could be our relationship with IBM or any of our cloud partner providers, if you take the constructs of NSX and software-defined networking, we have the ability to leverage that VMware infrastructure to extend that networking and security functionality into the cloud. So all the tools that you use today on-prem are the same tools that you would use to manage these same workloads running in public cloud, right? But public cloud, but VMware infrastructure in public cloud, right? Not the native Amazon space in this particular use case, okay? So situations like this, it allows companies to say, okay, we can have a cloud presence. There's not significant change in the workload itself. There's not significant change in the management or the skills that we need or anything like that, because it's just VMware infrastructure, but running on top of public cloud hardware, right? And so those same concepts of networking that we had in the physical world, switching and routing and load balancing, all that kind of stuff, obviously they exist when you move to cloud, but it's a very different mentality, because you can't call Amazon and say, hey, can you give me a VLAN, right? You can't call Amazon and say, hey, can I configure some firewall rules? You don't have access to that stuff. It's very heavily driven as software-defined networking, as software-defined security. So in this case here, what you can develop on-prem and develop in the cloud is consistent between the two, right? It follows the workload wherever it goes. Part of the virtual cloud network, beyond just the NSX Data Center stuff, is something that we have called Hybrid Connect. So when companies look at this and say, okay, that's great, but I'm not running NSX over here, and I have no intention to, because I really want to get more to cloud, or I've got 500, 1,000, 3,000 workloads running on one version of ESX or vSphere over here, and now I'm going to buy some space in Amazon, but it's a totally different version. Hybrid Connect is the utility that allows you to migrate all those workloads. So whether it's a cold migration or a hot migration, it's the tool that allows you to get your workloads into that cloud infrastructure. So another piece of that puzzle with Virtual Cloud Network. Now obviously the extension of cloud doesn't necessarily mean the extension of vSphere infrastructure, because out here we also have Azure, right? You've got native AWS, so not running VMware infrastructure. And if you're looking at a cloud strategy that includes either of these, well, you're looking at it thinking, all right, it's not going to make sense for me to move workloads from here to here if doing so means that I have to rebuild my networking, or if I have to rebuild my security, then that could mean potential downtime, right? Because it means I got to go through the QA process again. I got to make sure that the vulnerabilities that I had closed up spending all this time here are now closed up here. So the other part of the virtual cloud network is what we call NSX Cloud, and that is let us create one single management pane for security. Let's create a single set of policies, and if that workload runs here, the policies apply. If that workload runs here, the policies apply. If that workload runs here, the policies apply. So we're taking that same security mechanism that we had on-prem or vSphere infrastructure and now extending that into Azure or native AWS. So when we think about the economics of cloud, you can get to a point where economics become the decision factor for where you run a workload. Here's a new workload. All right, what is the cost to run it on-prem? What's the cost to run it in IBM? What's the cost to run it in Azure? What's the cost to run it in native AWS? And say, okay, the cheapest place is in Azure. Great, we spin it up in Azure. But security has already been defined. I don't have to redefine those things. Because obviously in cloud, what if 6 months later it's actually cheaper to bring it back on-prem? Or 6 months later it's cheaper to put it in VMC and AWS? If you had to go through all of these technical hurdles to try and get the workload there, you wouldn't make that decision. Even though the economics might suggest it, you wouldn't make that decision. But if from a technical standpoint, you don't have to make those changes, then you can truly make those decisions based on economics, right? Any questions so far? No? So, in our relationship with VMC and AWS, one of the things that they just added recently was the ability to do DR. So you can actually go into your VMC on AWS and you check a box and it'll deploy Site Recovery Manager. So all the components for Site Recovery Manager get deployed, and now you go in and you create your protection groups, you create recovery plans, and now you've got DR into Amazon. So if you think about cloud, in the cloud mentality, hypervisor, you really don't care about. It doesn't matter to you, right? You're not going to call Amazon and say, hey, what hypervisor are you running underneath there? It wouldn't change your decision to run in Amazon, right? Or storage, right? You're not going to call Amazon, hey, what storage? How fast are your disks? It's really, can you meet the characteristics of the IOPS requirements? And if so, okay, great, I'll do it. But what you do want consistent in any cloud strategy is networking and security. Because we're not going to re-IP applications as they move. We're not going to change security as these things move, right? And so for VMware, our play is to maintain our presence in that stack so that you can have consistency of networking and security no matter which cloud you go to.